You are listening to the Power of Why podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Power of Why podcast. My name is Naomi Haile, and today I am joined by the incredible Terry Knickerbocker. Terry, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Naomi. I didn't know that's how you pronounced your last name.
Well, I'm from East Africa, and so I take
Yeah.
my dad's first name, which is Haile. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's great. Oh, like Haile Selassie.
Welcome to the show, Terry. I'm so
Thank you.
excited to chat with you today. I've learned a lot just even exploring the summer intensive with you this summer. Um, and I think you're brilliant. I think so much of
Mm.
how we experienced each other in the class, like as students and learners, really eager to soak in so much of your expertise and your insights. We tangibly saw the growth in just over 6 weeks. And I can imagine
Mm.
for the folks that you're working with, during your 2-year conservatory, that growth is exponential. And so thank you for agreeing to be on the podcast. Today, I want to talk to you all about purpose, all about how important training is, your journey starting your own company and studio after working with William Esper for a few decades. So, for the audience, I'd like to introduce you to Terry Knickerbocker. So, for the past 30 years in New York City, Terry has acted, directed, coached, and produced art with some incredible individuals. Terry is a graduate of the experimental theater wing in the drama department at NYU, New York University. And after graduating from NYU, Terry trained as an actor and a teacher with William Esper and also taught there for over 25 years. It was through his desire to build an acting career that celebrated the voice and imagination of the individual that Terry discovered the Meisner technique in his training with William. He was also a core faculty member at NYU's Tisch School of the Arts. Terry consults with playwrights and screenwriters on their scripts and has also coached actors on over 300 films, television, and theater projects, both on and off Broadway and regionally. Some of the actors he's worked with and trained include Sam Rockwell, Chris Messina, Boyd Holbrook, Natasha Lyonne, and many more. And in 2015, Terry started his own company, the Terry Knickerbocker Studio in Brooklyn, where he and his incredible team are focused on helping actors master their craft and build confidence in their ability to act through the Meisner technique. And you can learn more at terryknickerbockerstudio.com. So, welcome again to the Power of Why.
Thank you. I would make one correction, Naomi, just that I don't think we're helping. I don't think we at the studio are getting students to master the craft. I think we're trying to teach them the craft. And Sanford Meisner, whose work is what we teach here and is kind of my mentor grandfather, would say that it takes another 20 years
Mm-hmm.
to master it. That mastery is like that 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell thing. So we're going to give you the tools,
Mm-hmm.
just like you go to medical school and you learn how to be a surgeon, but it takes probably 20 years to become a master surgeon.
Mm-hmm.
I only say that because mastery is something to aspire to, and it's not something you can do in a short time.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you for that. Thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah,
I'd love for you to start by telling us a little bit about your origin story, Terry. I know that you're the child of two parents who were lawyers, and you
yeah.
chose a path as an actor. How did you grow up, and what did you love doing as a kid?
My parents met in law school, lived in Brooklyn Heights until I was 7, and then moved up to Boston because my dad got another job up there, which was hard on my parents, especially on my mother, because she loved New York and was from the Bronx and New Yorker born and bred. What did I like doing? I liked pretending. I liked music. My parents took me to the theater and to concerts. So music, we always had music in the house. My dad had like a hi-fi set, and a record player and speakers and stuff like that, and liked movies and plays and puppets and pretending. I remember my dad had this chess set. It came in a box, all the chess pieces, and I would endlessly pretend that a wooden box that box was a boat and that those chess pieces were passengers on the boat. So I was always making up stories, I think. I have a sister who's 5 years younger than I am, and I had some friends. I had a neighbor next door, Wendy Smith, who was a good friend, and another friend down the street, Mark Laszlo. I liked sports. I liked watching sports. And then I came to like hockey when we moved to
Mhm.
Boston. Boston's colder, and I learned how to skate, and I loved skating and loved playing hockey. I didn't really choose to be an actor until later. I liked acting and I did acting. And my mom, I remember, would like help me learn lines back in like sixth and seventh grade when I did a play. And then I didn't do theater for a while. And then did another play my senior year of high school. I did West Side Story, which I loved being part of. And I don't think I really knew who I was at that point. And the normal trajectory was to go to college,
Mhm.
obviously back then. And I wasn't all that interested. I was kind of an underachiever. That was what all my report cards said. Terry has all this potential, but he's just not working up to his potential. And it's true. I wasn't really all that interested, and I was
Were you bored or?
I think I was sad and
Mm.
confused and didn't really feel like I'd found my place. It felt a little bit like a square peg in a round hole. I was a bit of a defiant, didn't like to be told what to do, smoked a bunch of weed a lot back then, and ended up at Boston University not really wanting to go to college and not even having really filled out most of my applications, even though I was supposed to have. Like I was sort of just not doing my homework. Although I did love the West Side Story experience. That was a highlight of my high school years. And then my dad kind of discovered, oh, you didn't fill out college applications. Well, we got to do something about that. And he was teaching at BU at the time and made a phone call or two, and somehow I got in. Because I had maybe decent SATs, but not really all that great grades. They were okay. But then I didn't go to class. And I kept that a secret from my parents. Like I was enrolled, they were paying for Boston University. I was living in a dorm, even though they lived in Cambridge. And in my first week, I saw an audition notice for a weird, obscure French operetta called The Grand Duchess of Gerolstein, which I'm sure nobody listening to this or even anybody in the world has ever heard of, written by a guy named Jacques Offenbach. And I auditioned and I got a part as like in the chorus. I had to sing. I love singing. That became a home and a family for me. And it was put on by a group, a club, because BU has an acting program. I just wasn't in it. I was in the liberal arts because I was going to be a French major. I liked speaking French and I had a good accent because that I think has something to do with acting and being able to
Mhm.
imitate. And
Mhm.
I think you're going to ask me about voice later, and that was important. Yeah, I auditioned, I got in, and that became a family. I stayed with that group. I became president of that group and did a lot of shows at Harvard because they had a club too. Boston was obsessed with Gilbert and Sullivan, which I'd seen growing up with my family. My dad used to play the records, so I was like really set up for that. And then I started doing straight plays. And of course, my parents found out that I wasn't going to school by the end of my first year, and BU kicked me out. You can't be here. You didn't go to school. I either had F's or incompletes. So I started working and moved out of the house and moved in with a girlfriend, got an apartment who I'd met. She was playing the cello in a show I was doing. After a couple years, I started to realize I better learn how to do this. Like I was just winging it. So I applied to NYU. It was the only place I applied to. I took the train down one day. I'd worked on these weird poems for my audition because a woman who was in a show I was in who knew how to act, she said, yeah, you should work on some, but they want monologues. Let's not do monologues. Let's do poems. So I did these weird poems and I got into NYU, and then my life really changed. So I don't know. That's a short trip through the origin story because I didn't grow up wanting to be an actor. I sort of rediscovered acting accidentally. There aren't really any accidents, but that's how that happened.
Yeah, and you were auditioning in high school, right? Did you do anything in elementary or middle school related to
I did a
acting or theater?
play. a couple of plays in middle school. That's when my mom was helping me. I don't know what those plays were. I don't remember them. They were just like school plays. And then I went to summer camp, like when I was 11, 12, and they had a drama club. But those people didn't seem to really want me, for whatever reason. Like I could go there, but I wasn't in the in crowd. There was a radio club, and I liked radio too. And so I became a DJ on the camp radio station, spinning records because I liked rock and roll. It really took off after I got kicked out. Well, once I started doing stuff with the Savoyards and then the Harvard people and the MIT people. And
Can you bring us back to your time at NYU, graduating, and then your early years training as an actor with William Esper? How did you, first of all, find William Esper? And was the transition period from finishing at NYU to then training with his studio, did that happen organically? Did you seek him out?
yeah, so I was at NYU and for all 4 years. NYU at the time was affiliated, they have a studio system in the drama department. So they place you in one of usually six different studios based on some kind of intuition. And I was placed in a studio called Circle in the Square, which is a theater on Broadway in New York. And they also have an acting school, but they're no longer connected to NYU, but they were back then. So I spent 2 years at Circle in the Square. And that was a very traditional program where the training was very related to the method. The main
Hmm.
acting teacher was this wonderful woman named Teresa Hayden, who was a member of the Actors Studio and had studied with Lee Strasberg, who was alive at the time, teaching that work. And then also this very important Greek director teacher named Nikos Sakaropoulos, who's also dead now, but Nikos had founded the Williamstown Theater Festival, which is probably one of the in Massachusetts, was one of and still remains in some ways one of the best summer professional theater, places out there. And he was especially gifted at the plays of Chekhov and Tennessee Williams and Eugene O'Neill and Arthur Miller. So I was doing that training. And meanwhile, NYU requires you to take academics. And I took as an elective a theater class called Contemporary Experimental Theater, taught by a guy named Ron Argelander. That was about like all this sort of avant-garde stuff that was happening in New York and elsewhere starting in the 1960s. And I found it fascinating. And Ron was a great teacher. And Ron had started with a woman named Mary Overly and a man named Wendell Beavers, who were married at the time, this thing called the Experimental Theater Wing. It had just started at NYU as an internal studio. And I talked to Ron and said, because I noticed Circle in the Square was located on Broadway and 50th Street, like right in the heart of Broadway. And Backstage, which was the newspaper, now it's a website, would come out, and a lot of the students would audition for stuff while they were training. And then I would notice that the teacher would say in class one day, like, who wants to work today? And some people would say, oh, I'd like to work, but I've got an audition later. And they were sort of dressed for the audition. And something about that didn't make sense to me. I didn't know why at the time, but it's like now I can say, well, yeah, you're there to train. And when you train, you're in the dojo. And you got to work on that. And so meanwhile, at the experimental theater wing, it was just an empty space and people in sweatpants working on their craft. And something about that was really special. So I transferred from Circle in the Square to the experimental theater wing and met a teacher, a wonderful teacher named Rina Yerushalmi, who was an Israeli director. She and many other teachers there, including the great Anne Bogart, who started the CT company, were foundational in this idea of like making your own work and really discovering your place in the craft. And I didn't even think I'd ever need to go above 14th Street, Like I wasn't interested in Broadway. I loved movies and television, but I didn't think that was for me. We were just going to make our own weird personal work. And I did a lot of plays and a lot of projects and had great teachers and great classmates. And I graduated, and then I was in a class with Rena and some of my other classmates. After we graduated, we would just go there and work. And I did some projects with Rena. She worked at a wonderful theater called La Mama here in New York, an important off Broadway theater. And so for a couple of years, I was just doing projects after I graduated from NYU and sometimes making some money and working as a waiter, living in an East Village. But I was in this class of Rena's, and it was a scene study class. So we'd work on a scene, and then when we were done with that, we'd work on another scene. It was just like an ongoing weekly thing. She'd rent some space in East Village. And one week, I worked on a scene from Bertolt Brecht from a play called Baal, and it went well. This is great. So the next scene she suggested was from Morning Becomes Electra, which is a Eugene O'Neill play. He wrote Long Day's Journey into Night. Some people might know that. Or Iceman Cometh. And I couldn't figure it out. Intellectually, I knew what was needed. It was very dramatic. It was a scene where the brother and the sister are in a room and the dead father's corpse is in the room with them. And it called for all this emotion. Morning Becomes Electra. That's like the Greek play Electra. So that's like Medea, Oedipus, like those Greek plays. That's where the concept of catharsis came from, and deep well of emotion. And NYU, God bless them for all the great experiences there, had not left me with a toolkit and a craft that I knew how to solve the acting problems in that particular scene. And that really frightened me because I thought, well, I should be able to know what I'm doing. And how can it be that some days I know what I'm doing and some days I don't? I was still, in a way, winging it, despite having had all these teachers, but it was sort of like a smorgasbord. It'd be like learning to cook and having someone teach you a little bit about sushi, and then someone else teaching you a little bit about Russian food, and then someone else teaching you a little bit about Spanish food or African food or whatever. And it's like, okay, I know how to make all those dishes, but I don't know the principles of food. I don't know what makes food work, right? And so Rena, at that time, Rena Yerushalmi, my teacher, was also directing a show at La Mama that I was working backstage on. And she was dating this guy named Joel Rooks at the time. And Joel had studied and was now teaching with William Esper. I didn't know that, but Rena came in one day and just said, well, we'll do this thing called the repetition exercise because Joel had showed it to her. And so we did that. I was like, okay, that's fine. But then I saw Joel backstage at this play at La Mama playing the lead, and he was mind-blowing. And it was such a masterful performance. And every night it was consistently amazing and fresh. And I said, Joel, how do you do that? And he said, well, I studied with this guy, Bill Esper. And I never heard of him. I never heard of Meisner, which is hard to believe nowadays. But he was kind of a well-kept secret. Like we knew about Lee Strasberg back then. We knew about Stella Adler. She was also teaching at the time. And we knew about a teacher named Uta Hagen. But I didn't know about Meisner. So I made a phone call and had an appointment to go meet Bill and said, I think I want to train with you because I want to become good, and he said, sure. And I always tell this story when people ask me about this. And I thought that since I'd been at NYU for 4 years, that I should I wasn't a beginner, So I said, Bill, where are you going to put me in your studio as a graduate of NYU? And he said, at the beginning. And I went, yeah, Bill, but where are you going to put me in your studio? I mean, I'm a graduate of NYU. And he got a little annoyed and swore. Do you swear on this podcast, Naomi? Is
It's
that allowed?
open.
Or
Yeah.
it's open? He
Yeah.
said, are you fucking deaf? At the beginning. And he said, look, you went to NYU and they accepted you. So you auditioned. That's a good school. Congratulations. You must be talented. But everybody who studies the Meisner technique with me, and it starts at the beginning because we don't know where the holes are in each actor. And I was like, okay, that was a little humbling, but it made sense. And so I signed up to be in his class in the fall. And what was amazing, which felt bad at the time, Bill's class was full. I was seeing him in like August. This was 2 years after I graduated from NYU. And he was already full. So he said, I don't have any space in my class, but you can be what I call an alternate, which are people who watch class, but then you work in a smaller group with another teacher while you wait for someone to leave, because people will leave. Either I'll kick them out, or they'll decide the work's too hard, or they'll decide they don't want to act, or they'll want to move to Hawaii, or who knows what. And usually that happened by Christmas. There were 8 of us in the alternates, and people started leaving, but one by one, and then there were just 2 of us left, and then no one else left. And so
Wow.
my entire first year, I wound up having the benefit of being in Bill's class, watching him, and working occasionally. I would work when someone was absent or sick for the day. He'd say, well, come on, you come up and do. But most of the time I was watching, but I was still
Yeah.
absorbing all his teaching. And then who was my teacher for the alternates but the amazing Maggie Flanagan, who went off and started her own studio in 2001, but had been with Bill for many years and was just starting to teach then. And, she's a genius. So I got the benefit, unlike most of my classmates who were already in Bill's class, of having like 2 heavyweight teachers. And not only that, when I was working with Maggie, as you may remember, Naomi, in the Meisner work, you usually bring in one exercise, right? That
Yeah.
you bring in one, everyone brings in one activity. But when it got down to me and this other guy, this guy's name was Ted, um, she said, I'm not going to come in and work with the 2 of you for just one exercise. That's boring to me. So you should do 2 exercises, right? So then I do 2 exercises. That's a double workout. And then I'd have to have another activity just in case someone was absent from Bill's class. So it was like going to the gym and doing 3 a days. And sometimes I would do 3 exercises in one day. So I got incredible muscles, acting muscles, doing that the first year. And then, Bill's class, as is mine, was by invitation into the second year. So I was very nervous, was I going to get let in or not? And we'd get a letter, a physical letter. There was no email. And I got in, and then I was in Bill's class for second year. So that was just the most transformational time ever. Because Bill was an incredible teacher. Maggie was an incredible teacher. My classmates, so many of them were just great. And it was thrilling. It was the best 2 years of my life. It was so artistic and so, what you said in the introduction, so transformational. It really instilled in me something that was all about craft, process, tools.
That was something you emphasized in every single class that we had. And first of all, I can't even imagine coming up with 3 exercises per class because I think we struggled with one or bringing in two
Yeah,
per week. So
yeah, but I'm just thinking, like, look at the people who write for Saturday Night Live. Like, they have to come up with so much stuff
yeah,
every week, and when you're put up against the problem, you find a way to solve it.
yeah,
And you
absolutely.
get better at it because you're solving it. I'm sure. How many podcast episodes have you done?
Over 100.
So would you say that you're better at this now than you were when you started?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Practice.
hmm
Yeah.
It was a good challenge. And I think also having the pleasure of seeing what everyone else came up with and how it was different every time we did it was fantastic. Something you emphasized often was just the value and the importance of training. And when you were watching that actor on stage, you talked about the consistency. Like you would go a few times a week, and every time it felt fresh, even if it was the same play. It felt fresh, it was consistent. And can you talk a little bit about the importance and the value of training, what you're seeing today in the industry, and basically arranging for consistent behavior, which is something I've heard you talk about in a different interview.
Yeah. Well, I think someone who's really good at something is good at it all the time, whether that's an athlete or a chef or a plumber or a doctor or a teacher, a painter, a dancer, a singer, a musician, are able to consistently be at a very high level. I mean, like the work they do, the food they're able to cook, the music they're able to make, the songs they're able to sing or to write are consistently good. To be able to arrange for that consistently, as opposed to when I went to Bill and discovered my work was hit or miss, takes a lot of practice. And that is craft. That is learning the craft. That's an old-fashioned thing, like a bricklayer, like a house painter. I have this amazing Jamaican guy, Cleon, who I was so lucky to be turned on to years ago when I bought a house in 2006. So we needed the house painted. And someone said, you have to work with Cleon. Cleon is old school. Cleon knows what he's doing. Cleon is a master and he's humble. But when you want something done, when he's done, it looks great and it looks perfect. And there's something about the ability to do that beautifully and well, which comes from training and studying. Look at ballet, look at
Mm.
the violin. It takes years to get really good at something. And I think there's a fallacy when it comes to acting that you actually don't need to do that. Or a sport. How long does it take to become a Kobe Bryant, right? A Muhammad Ali? Of course, there's talent. That's what you're born with. That's an affinity for the doing of it and a love of it, I would assume. But it's putting in the reps. Kobe Bryant had a reputation as being, he would get up at 4 in the morning and go to the gym 3 hours before the rest of the team showed up. You do that all the time, you're going to have something. And so it's this obsessional devotion to doing something well that leads to high achievement, whatever that is. Because what you practice, you get good at. If you practice being lazy and inconsistent, you'll be good at being lazy and inconsistent, right? I love when things are done well, whatever it is. It could be a sandwich, but if it's really made well, it's a pleasure. There's so much content between Hulu and Netflix and Paramount Plus and whatever. They'll just put something up and it's mediocre. There was an article in the New York Times recently about meth TV, which are like these shows that are popular, but they're not amazing. But you'll watch them because it's better than other stuff. But it's not like, whoa, that's appointment television. That's a must see, you know? And then you've got shows like Curb Your Enthusiasm or The Sopranos or whatever, like that, or The Wire, that are just extraordinary writing, extraordinary acting, like it's a perfect storm. I want to see that. And I want to be able to have actors be able to do that. And when you hire a superstar, you want that from them. That's what they're bringing. They're bringing, okay, they got skill, and that comes from practice and training. And I think the fallacy is that, well, I'm good looking and I'll just work on auditioning. I'll work on meeting people. I'll get a job. And you can get a job. You know, if you're good looking and you're pushy and you have a lot of followers, someone will hire you. But at the end of your career, you won't have a body of work that you can be proud of and say, look what I achieved. Because really good art is amazing to be a witness to. It changes people, right? Culture changes people. When you make a great film, a great song, a great painting, a great poem, the world has changed. And when it's mediocre, it's like mediocre pizza. There are a lot of pizza places in New York. Pizza by the slice. Most of them are forgettable. I want someone to be able to make that memorable slice that makes you need to go back there again.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It's quality. It's the emphasis on quality, which in
Yeah.
your class we talked about on day one.
We did.
And do you care about quality? Because it calls for care.
Mm.
And it calls also for discernment and a lack of perfectionism so that you can get humble and go, oh, I'm not there yet. What do I need to do to get incrementally better, inch by inch?
Yeah, I took away a lot from your class. And as someone who came in, obviously, clearly not as an actress or someone who wanted to pursue that space, I found so much value in what you just said around like getting out of your own head, which I know I continue to struggle with, but your class helped so much in leaning into impulse and it helped so much. I can't like sometimes I can't even put it into words because I saw the value even in interviewing and listening. I think the skill translates to so much of how we show up as people and how we relate to each other. Yeah, it transcended work for me and it went into just even relationships and relating to people. So it was amazing.
Well, it's about being authentic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And about valuing what's true for you, even if it's not popular or what most people might say, but actually really it makes you very self-aware because the actor needs to use themselves. You know, bricklayers are very aware of bricks and cement and their tools.
Mhm.
Well, we make acting out of ourself. And so we therefore have to really understand what it means to be human and what
Yeah.
it means to be this human. What gets me going? What do I care about? What do I what do I really feel? You go and you meet someone and you go, "Hey, nice to see you." And they go, "Yeah, nice to see you." But you actually know that it wasn't so nice to see you or that they don't really like you that much. Cultivating that awareness of your own personal truth and how to really listen to people, deeply listen, and empathetically listen creates so much connection in the world, both to others and to ourselves.
Yeah. And really frank conversations as well, where I noticed almost immediately, within the first couple weeks, how I was able to show up in conversations with the people that I care about. And if I noticed something was a little off or we needed to have an important conversation that maybe you would avoid in any other circumstance, it allowed for deeper connection because we were able to go there, with each other. And so, and something that you talked about in class also, you would reference incredible actors who also spent time in theater, like Viola Davis, and how resonant they are, not just because of their voice and how they use their voice, but also their ability to be private and public was something that you would say often. And so, can you talk a little bit about being able to access your unique talent? Because you talked about talent and it being inherent or something that you're born with, but coupled with coaching and consistent training, being able to access your unique talent, what does that take? And in the individuals that you've crossed paths with, who stands out to you in terms of their ability to access that on a consistent basis?
The first person who comes to my mind is Philip Seymour Hoffman. He was a volcano and really honored the wildness inside him for the purpose of storytelling in so many different kinds of characters. And he just had such an incredible reverence for the craft and for storytelling. You know, it's that question that kids get asked, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think we have an assumption that you're supposed to know that by a certain time. And some people know it earlier. You know, you look at Michael Jackson in those early performances of the Jackson Five when he was, ABC and stuff like that, just tiny. He was clearly a genius. I don't know if you hear this, but they're singing Happy Birthday at my studio right now. There's a lot going on. So that may bleed into, I'm in my office, but it's not soundproof. That's my community. So I didn't know I was going to be an actor when I was doing those things. That was more like a hobby. Literally, I thought I was going to be a French major. And I thought, well, what would the career path for that be? Be like a diplomat. That's what I thought. I'd like work at the UN and translate or something like that. I certainly didn't know I was going to be a teacher. That seemed like a crazy responsibility. So I think parents and a community need to support the time it takes for people to discover what it is that they were born to do. And I have a kind of a metaphysical idea that everyone is born for a reason, and they have some unique contribution to offer humanity in this planet in the time, in the brief time that we get to be here. And it's something, and it's not necessarily, it doesn't really have anything to do with name and fame. It might be being a mother. It might be being a politician. It might be being an actor, but there's some thing that they were born to do, and giving them the space to discover what that is and to listen to what will become emergent. And then you look backwards, you go, oh, of course, I wanted to be an actor. I knew that back then, but I didn't know that back then.
Mm.
And I'm a bit of a late bloomer, and other people, more like the tortoise than the hare. And some people, they know right away, or they're pushed into it. Like my son, I have an 11-year-old son and a 3-year-old daughter. My son has never really had much interest in acting. He really loves math a lot. He loves video games, and he's very social, the opposite of me. I'm a recluse. But this year he's in the 6th grade, and he's going to drama club. He decided as an after school thing. And I have to, watch myself that I don't go, ooh, that's really cool, because I really don't have an agenda for him to be an actor. I have an agenda for him to be happy. So I don't know if I answered your question.
Yeah, no, you
There's
did.
a guy, there's a guy named Frederick Buchner who died recently, and he talked about the concept of a worthy life. What is a worthy life? He said it's something like when your great gladness meets the world's great appetite. That the
Mm.
thing that you love to do more than anything, your zone of genius, the thing you would do even if you didn't get paid for it because it feels so good to do it, meets the thing that the world needs in that moment. That's a kind of an incredible thing, whatever that is.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're operating in your zone of genius? And what
I
would you say that
do.
is?
I think it has something to do with acting and with helping people, whether they're learning how to act or the professional actors that I coach. And I just had a session this morning before we started with one of the people you mentioned in the intro, working on a new movie. Solve the thing in them that wants to be expressed and help getting it clearer. So something like a midwife, something like a facilitator for unkinking the hose and supporting what wants to emerge and giving some guidance and coaching and feedback, sometimes pushing a little bit if they don't know, not in a mean way or in a harsh way, but like if something wants to emerge, change is scary, and childbirth is painful, and it's not meant to be painful, but that's just what it is. It's sometimes hard to birth something and to know what wants to come out because we're so used to the what's normal. So this actor was saying to me, "Oh my God, I just got this script, and it's everything you've always wanted for me." He was so excited about it. He just said he couldn't stop thinking about me when he was reading it because it's so much of what we've been working on for years and years and years. So I think my zone of genius, and that's a tricky word, but I want to embrace it, is something around the craft of acting and helping actors, like listening to them, seeing what wants to come out and knowing how to support that and standing for quality in that.
Yeah, that's the through line of everything you do. Guiding actors through any potential blocks that they have in their work is something that you just talked about. I remember one class distinctly you said, I wish I could meet you all at 2 years old. In that moment, it resonated with me of, thinking back to when I was a kid, and we're obviously we're much more ourselves and free, and anything would come out the way that it needed to without this desire to filter it through anything. And so,
Right.
how does reconnecting with that childhood freedom through, you have clown classes at your studio, help actors through their process and refining their craft?
Well, it's the creative process. And you mentioned the word impulse. And now I'm thinking about Robin Williams. I think you can see in his work and certainly in his like talk show appearances that this is a completely unfiltered, wild, free, creative genius, right? Just loves to just honor his impulse and doesn't has no filter, doesn't care. Yesterday, Ezra Klein, who is a columnist for the New York Times, did an audio essay about Donald Trump and said that's his thing. That the thing that people are most scared about with him is that he really doesn't care what anybody thinks. He says what's on his mind, whether it's like, let's dance to music for 40 minutes or I'm not a Trump supporter. But that's a lot what people respond to is his freedom in a weird way. He has all these handlers to make sure that he doesn't kind of go off the rails. It's that there's a question on your sheet about coloring inside the lines or outside the lines, like being willing to color outside the lines and not care. Two is a beautifully free time. That impulsive part of you that doesn't have to be appropriate, that doesn't have to, that isn't toilet trained, that doesn't care, that just anything comes out, is very useful for the making of things. They're just putting paint on the canvas and cleaning it up later. Trusting the voice inside you that's not the civilized voice, the appropriate voice, the one that says, what Freud would call the superego, the inner parent. Don't do that. People don't like that. Say the right thing, and is willing in the artistic space to trust your impulses. I mean, I'm even thinking about like Matthew McConaughey, who was making all this money doing rom-coms
Yeah.
and was the king of rom-coms. And something restless inside him said, something else needs to happen in my artistic life. Even though I make all this money and it's what people see me as, it's not what makes sense for me anymore. I want to do something more dramatic. And he was out of work for 3 years, turned down $12 million for one job, which I think takes guts, until Dallas Buyers Club and said, no, I'm pivoting. And I love the bravery in that and the sticking to his guns. This is what we're doing. It takes courage, it takes inner listening, but the freedom we have as children is kind of what we need as adults in our creative professional life, I would say. Not doing what people told us to do, what we're supposed to do, what's appropriate, but actually what feels true and right for each of us, because we only get one life, so we might as well honor it.
Yeah. Bringing in, I remember listening to that interview, and I'm sure he talked about it thoroughly in his book, that decision to pivot and get out of that mold that he was kind of stuck in for a very long time. And in that example of him turning down millions of dollars, they kept increasing his pay over and over again to, try to convince him to take this role on. And it was brave to say no because he knew that he was working towards something greater for what he wanted out of his career. But I think that can be translated to so many other spaces. And I think if you're making any particular change or looking to see any reinvention in your own life, it does require you to actually become a new person, to be able to walk into that. I'm curious to know, because you've worked with so many individuals in classes and also one-on-one, what are the most like significant internal barriers that you see people navigate, but you wish didn't get in the way of their acting work? Is it this freedom and this childlike expression? Is there anything else that you've
Well,
seen
that's not a barrier. That's what wants to come out of the
come out?
barrier. I think the barrier is fear. I think the primary obstacle for most people is fear. Because change is scary. Leaping into a new career, getting married, buying a house, moving to a strange new town on impulse is terrifying. And, there's this concept of the starving artist, and obviously the career prospects for acting are different than getting an MBA or a doctor or a lawyer. There's no guarantees. And I'm not talking about whether you become a movie star. That's kind of about luck and marketing and what the moment is calling for. Like they just may not know, they may not need whatever you have in a stardom sense, but I believe that if you really get good at something, you will be successful because we need people who are good at things. But it's terrifying because it's an investment and it's a leap of faith. And it's saying, I'm going to do this even though I don't know how it's going to turn out. That's about the career thing, but even about like doing something new. In your class, I'm a proponent of neuroplasticity and like taking risks and shaking up the snow globe and not just doing the thing that's comfortable because what's comfortable starts to get a little encrusted and then you're not really in a space of expansion. I think we need to keep expanding. We need to keep finding new horizons. And new horizons, going down an unfamiliar path, an unknown path, is scary. And so accepting that and doing it anyway is the best course. What a lot of people do is they stop themselves. And then they end up having regrets.
Yeah. There was something else you said before we wrap up today was that most of the barriers that we saw of being able to allow whatever needs to come out, they were habits that we built over time and through our lives. And you just touched on it again. I'm curious in your role, and you've been teaching for over 25 years, which I think is an amazing and incredible responsibility. Um, what do you appreciate most about being a teacher and helping people release and tap into that expansion and helping people kind of build new habits that allow them to produce high quality work and actually get closer to operating in their purpose and in their within their zone of genius.
Isn't it so exciting? I mean,
Yeah.
it's so collaborative, to be given the awesome trust of someone. That's why I was scared to teach for a long time because it just seemed like such an awesome responsibility. It's why I would be scared to be a surgeon. Like, what if I screw up your brain? It's like, but I love that connection and I love helping them make that connection and to be collaborating on that. Theater is a very collaborative thing. You can't, even if you're doing a one-woman show, you need someone to run the lights and you need someone, like it takes a village. And when all that comes together and everyone's moving in the right direction, which is what we see in championship teams or in movies and shows that work out or restaurants that find a way to operate on a high level and give an incredible experience. I'm thinking about that show, The Bear, when it really comes together, it's thrilling. And to be part of that, to be part of something that works together to make something, to be part of helping someone take the next step, because I have appreciated, Maggie Flanagan and Bill Esper and so many of my teachers were instrumental in sharing, in mentoring, in paying it forward, in giving me things that they'd learned on their journey. So how cool to tell people who are hungry for it
Yeah.
what I've figured out so that they can go on and become their geniuses. That's thrilling. I love it. It's like parenting in a way.
Yeah. Thank you for this. This was really nice to speak with you and reconnect after a couple months. I didn't mention it at the beginning, but you also have spent time in Vancouver and in Atlanta, on your tours and your road shows. So I'd love for you to talk about like how people can support you in your studio and the work that you're
Oh,
doing, and how can
sure.
people connect with you online and on the
That
road.
Well, that's very nice. I just came back from Vancouver. I was there last week, and I'm about to go to Berlin and Copenhagen. And I have a studio in New York City. My work life is primarily teaching acting and running what I think is the best acting studio in New York. And it's not because of me, partly because of me, but also because of my incredible staff, my incredible faculty, and my incredible students who you heard singing Happy Birthday maybe before. We have a wonderful community here. So if you're somebody who would be curious to become a good actor, even if you're a beginner, and you don't want to regret at the end of your life that you didn't take that chance, that you didn't go skydiving when you wanted to go skydiving, we'd love to see you. Our main thing here is we do a 2-year conservatory program, and that sets you up to have a career, to know how to do it. But we also, what you did was not the 2-year commitment, it was a 6-week commitment. So we have these intensives. We're going to have some classes starting in January that are the 2-year program. We have a spring intensive, we have a summer intensive. We're basically teaching all the time. And as you mentioned, we have clown, voice, movement, acting, Alexander technique, Michael Chekhov technique, stage combat, neutral mask, voiceover, all the tools that help make you a skilled actor, which then becomes a successful actor. And even if you're just curious, you might want to do, because I think it was clear when you showed up that you weren't saying, I know I want to be an actor. Although if you decided to be one, I think you could be one. But there was something else that just seemed like maybe this will be helpful for me. And you articulated that it's made you a better listener and maybe a better friend and family and who knows what. Like it really changes you. So if you're interested in a deep, fun, playful, meaningful journey, we do really good work here, and they can reach out to us at terryknickerbockerstudio.com. That's spelled like the Knickerbocker, like the Knicks, Knickerbocker, and it's Terry with a Y. They can reach out to me at terry@terryknickerbockerstudio.com. That's a mouthful. And come visit us in Brooklyn. We have a beautiful studio, as you know.
Thank you. Thank you, Terry. And thank you, everyone, for listening to another episode of the Power of Why podcast. We will catch you in the next conversation.
Thank you so much, Naomi. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to another thought-provoking episode of the Power of Why podcast. For show notes and additional resources, visit us at www.powerofwhy.co. And while you're here, subscribe to the show on iTunes, Spotify, or any other podcast platform to continue your journey towards understanding the power of your purpose and creativity.